I would like to welcome everyone to this panel discussion, a web discussion organized by the OPEK Association for Social Reform, together with AEJ Cyprus Section, the Association of European Journalists, the Cyprus Section. We are very glad today to host an important meeting among journalists and discuss openly on key challenges the journalists are facing in Europe as well as in Cyprus to address their fundamental right, freedom of expression, media freedom, and critical journalism. I'm Kyriakos Politis. I'm a founding member of the Cyprus section of AEJ, and at the same time, I'm vice president of OPEK, the Association for Social Reform, together with Hasan Kafecioglu, my dearest friend, a journalist living among the Turkish Cypriot community. We will have the chance today to discuss with members of the International Association of European Journalists, namely the president of the board of AEJ, Saiah. Tsaousidou. Good evening, Saiah from Nicosia. And with a prominent journalist, former BBC foreign correspondent, William Horsley, member of AEJ United Kingdom Section, media freedom representative of the Association of European Journalists, international director of the Center of Freedom of Media, University of Sheffield, in United Kingdom. We will have the chance for an open and sincere, frank discussion of the situation of media freedom in Europe and understand more about what is happening now in modern democracies. We call modern democracies the area where we live, the European Union, Europe as a whole, where, as we know, fundamental rights exist, but now are under heavy challenge from various perspectives. I would like to introduce also Soula Hadjikyriakou, a journalist, member of the Association for Social Reform. Good evening, Soula. Hello. And some of our members living in the north among the Turkish Cypriot community. Esra Ikin has joined already us, and I will give the chance to more of our friends, journalists, to be among our panelists. First, I would like to give a take to Saiah Tsaousidou to speak a little bit about AEJ, the Association of European Journalists International. She is the president of the board. Saiah, good evening from Nicosia. The floor is yours.
Good evening. Good evening, everybody. It's nice to see you, colleagues. It's my pleasure to be with you. I think that the theme today about media freedom is very interesting, and we, as Association of European Journalists, we spend a lot of our activities about this. And William Horsley, that is with us, is one of the experts and he can tell freedom. As for the association, we are a non-profit organization, and we are independent, international organization with neither party political nor union ties. It has NGO status with UNESCO and the Council of Europe. It's a member of a lot of European institutions, and has a working relation with the representative on freedom of the media, I mean the Organization for Security and Cooperation in Europe. Media freedom in Europe, as you all know, is one of crucial subjects and one of the main subjects for our association. And William, as I already told you, is an expert in this. And every year we're waiting, not only every year, but he is one of the journalists who has a cooperation, close cooperation with the Council of Europe about this. And we are happy that I think it was William's idea, the platform that creates in the Council of Europe website. And there are a lot of threats in journalists and journalism in all over Europe, and not only Europe. Our organization is has members, individual journalists, through their membership of the national sections. I want to say that we have a birthday this year. We become 60 years old. The association was set up in 1962. And we have more than 20 sections. As I say, not only in Europe, because our statute is like the Council of Europe. Every country is member of the Council of Europe. They can create a section. So that's why we had a very strong section in Turkey, but after Erdogan threats, they closed the department and the section, and now we have a representative, a very good representative there. And we have also connection with countries like Ukraine, like Russia, and we want to make, to establish new sections in the countries that we don't have. Most activities of the association are arranged by the section at national level. However, one of the aims of the International Association is to create links between individual journalists to exchange contacts, information, and ideas. AEJ partners with we have the European Journalism Center, an independent institution for training of journalists. We believe in the training of especially young journalists, and we organize often seminars about European issues, about media freedom, etc. I want to say that journalism today faces many difficulties. This is not only the lack of freedom that exists in our field, but also the unemployment that is constantly increasing. And these two are linked since the oversupply of labor increases, the possibility of controlling the workers in the press, the owners of the medium that we work, fire you at any time for not doing what they say. And in your place, he can hire someone who can control him. So you can see that freedom of the press is directly linked to the labor market. Those journalists who want to do their job properly, to present the news objectively, that is to present the news to the world, should do it with independence and transparency. This is not always easy, so they resort to creating their own websites and representing their stories there. We are living in very difficult times for journalism, and we need to arm ourselves in order to be able to survive. I don't want to take more time. I want to give the floor to my colleagues, and we can have time to discussion after. Thank you, Kyriakos and Hassan, for the invitation.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Saiah. Soula Hadjikyriakou has a long experience in journalism. She was for a long time in the public TV. We experienced, Soula, a lot of challenges during our career, especially in historical moments for Cyprus, and we do know what's the influence of propaganda and poisoning the atmosphere. You have the take for a few words about the OPEK and how important it is to keep media freedom in the priorities of our activities.
Yes, well, good evening, first of all. I'm glad to be tonight with you, with such distinguished colleagues. I have a long career in journalism, about 4 decades actually, and I've been through many changes, many developments in this media sector. The most important were the technology ones we had in recent years. But I think something which has not changed at all are the principles of journalism. That is the accuracy, like accuracy, dependence, objectivity, impartiality, fairness. Unfortunately, the situation in Cyprus today is not ideal at all. And press freedoms are being limited, especially in the last 10 years. Now, as OPEK and as a journalist, I believe that a strong journalism is the key to a strong democracy. But unfortunately, many challenges that we had in the last decade have changed the whole scenery. For example, because of the unemployment in this area of work, some journalists pay a lip service to the government to get a good paid job in the public sector. So they don't question authorities, they don't criticize them, but follow the official propaganda. Investigative journalism is rarely practiced as it needs money and time. Corruption thrives in Cyprus because not enough research is made by the press and not enough criticism is carried out. The scandal, for example, of the golden passports, which involved the president of the Cyprus Republic, the president of the parliament, and an MP of our parliament, was a scoop for Al Jazeera, a foreign mass media. It just shows you what is the situation in Cyprus. But the worst of all, I think, is the stand that journalists have, most journalists have, towards the Cyprus problem. They instead of following the peace climate and support the peace movement, they undermine any effort is made to find a peaceful solution for Cyprus. This is tragic for Cyprus. It's catastrophic in my view. And I'm sorry to say that it's going to destroy our country. Another thing, public broadcasting depends on state money. So government and political parties exercise pressure to get the maximum of visibility in society. Private media companies depend on adverts and donations from politically powerful people, so they serve their masters' interests. Mass media are manipulated, and in their turn, they manipulate the public opinion. I will stop here so that I can hear your views as well, and you can go on, follow the discussion. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Soula, for this introduction. The floor is now to William Horsley to deliver his speech as a keynote speaker with long experience, both in mainstream media in Europe, BBC, but mainly as the media freedom representative of the Association of European Journalists. William, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Kyriakos. Yes, I'm very proud to have done that job for more than 10 years now, and listening to your colleague Soula, and thank you very much, Saiah, for your nice introduction. I'm made very aware that journalists in the West or in a country like Britain, relatively free of the kind of direct oppression, which you clearly feel just in terms of employment, in terms of the lack of protection against legal threats. However, there is nowhere in Europe now that is, even the Nordic countries, even Scandinavia, they have a lot of attacks on journalists. The Netherlands, they've suffered heavy weapon attacks on media centers. So there is nowhere, and in this country, under Boris Johnson's, under this government, there are a lot of oppressive laws which can criminalize journalists, and these are some of the common factors. So even though there's not much I can tell you about the problems of journalism, I would just mention one of the books that I helped to put out with the Council of Europe, Mission to Inform Journalists at Risk Speak Out, where we spoke to 20 journalists from across Europe, and we got some very powerful testimony about the acute and the wide range of problems: physical attacks, legal attacks, exclusion, and of course, government vilification, stigmatizing journalists, talking them down, turning the public against them. So what I'd like to do, but I also have a little bit of positive news, I think, because in my work, I've been dealing very closely, and initially I didn't know what to expect, and it was very frustrating, but with European Union, Council of Europe, OSCE, I've also done the Safety of Journalists book for the OSCE, 3 editions actually. I worked for UNESCO, and I have somewhere quite an interesting paper which I put together with one of the researchers at the Reuters Institute for Study of Journalism in Oxford. It's called Freedom of Expression and the Safety of Journalists. And it really talks about, in the digital world and globalization, and particularly the new nationalism, which was mentioned, there is no hiding place for journalists. They can be reached, they can be the object of illegal surveillance, they can get into your computer, they can overhear what you say, they can criminalize you, and they can often come and get you. So that's the kind of broad picture. I thought there was a tweet the other day from Matthew Caruana Galicia, which I think kind of sums it up. If it weren't for my mother, he said, this bank would still be laundering the stolen millions it got from the president of Azerbaijan in the heart of the EU. This is how public funds were stolen from the people of Azerbaijan to bribe Maltese officials via the Politis bank. So then there's a link to an excellent Times of Malta article which tells the whole story about the massive money laundering and money suspected to be used for terrorism purposes. But it was the media that exposed that scandal, forced the closure of the bank, and the trail led to the businessman, you know the name, Jürgen Fenech, who's now in jail as a suspect to being the mastermind of that appalling assassination. So what does this tell us? This tells us, I think, 3 things. It's illustrative of 3 really important things about modern journalism. The personal danger, which is immensely increased. I'm now working with my colleagues in European Federation of Journalists, Reporters Without Borders, the International Press Institute, on the annual report of the Platform for the Safety of Journalists. And we have a database now to help us to explain or to follow. First thing is to monitor, to report, and then try and take action against this whole range of oppressions against journalists. And the numbers of attacks and so on are going up hugely. But last year, 2021, was a record. It was the worst year for killing of journalists since 2015, the Charlie Hebdo attacks, where 8 journalists and several others were killed. So 6 killed last year. A landmark killed 2 Azerbaijani journalists. You had in Georgia, a journalist was viciously beaten during, this is typical, during a violent protest by protesters against the Tbilisi Pride March. He died 6 days later. And then the host of a local radio station in Turkey was shot dead by someone on religious grounds. He didn't like what the secular things he said. And then we have in the Netherlands, Peter de Vries, the top Dutch crime reporter, and in Greece, Georgios Kalaivas, both of them apparently kind of contract killing type murders, and very difficult to track down those responsible. But they talk about a shadowy world of criminality behind these assaults on journalists. And I say the protections are getting much more difficult to put in place, partly because governments themselves in quite a few cases are not just inadequate, they may be complicit. And this comes, of course, from places like Russia and Azerbaijan and Turkey, and in the past, Ukraine as well. But this pattern of, and the Balkans to some extent, where more than 100 journalists were killed during the Balkan Wars, and now there are still 20 murders of journalists which are still unresolved. All this information is collected on the Council of Europe's platform, and I'll talk a little bit later about how we try and use that, how we're turning things around, because there is a turnaround in the understanding of the international institutions of the urgency of this thing, and particularly the link between the condition for journalists. Are they able to report freely? Are they bought up? Are they captive of the state? Are they captive of the oligarchs? Or can they really do their job, as Soula said, with accuracy and without fear or favor? You know, so there are some positives. But so to me, the Caruana Galizia story is typical in these ways. First of all, the great personal danger, the worse than ever. Secondly, it does show the vital importance of what journalists like that are doing. They are now a decisive factor in whether countries go the path of autocracy and authoritarianism, or whether they can hold the line. And this immense explosion of international corrupt dealings across borders with fake companies, with tax havens and so on, is now, and it's roping in both the politicians who are susceptible to bribery, and also it means that politicians are more aware of the need, from their point of view, to control the media, to buy it up themselves. It takes a public media to control the regulators, so that the public are denied this diversity of view. They're denied the original information. But against that, you have this fantastic birth of the International Consortium Investigative Journalism, doing the Panama Papers and so on, where that did lead to significant reforms and exposure of politicians, but it also led to a great deal of reprisals. So journalists are absolutely in the front line, and this phenomenon of what has been called the criminal services industry, which is often directed against journalists by the very wealthy and indeed the politically powerful, where they hire the expensive lawyers in London to send legal threats, slap threats against journalists. They hire reputation management companies. They can hire hitmen too, and they can even influence organizations like Interpol to get them to intervene and try and, arrest journalists like Can Dündar from Turkey. He was on the blacklist, on the red list rather, and he didn't know whether he could travel internationally without being arrested. So in those ways, this the lack of any safety within borders, the failure of the systems within borders, and then the vulnerability of journalists across borders. Of course, you've already mentioned, Soula, the background situation with the rise of the big tech companies, which of course destroyed the business model for the traditional media, but it also polluted the media landscape, and the trust in journalism or in media has collapsed in many ways since then, because people don't know the distinction. News is, they think, is cheap and free, whereas, as Soula said, it's quite the contrary. Good journalism is very expensive, and there are luckily some new formats, people doing that. So for the second part, I'll just say a little bit about my discovery as a media freedom representative. You know, after many years with the BBC, I reported quite widely from China, from Korea, from Bosnia, from the Caucasus, from Ukraine and places. I was not really aware until I went into this area of the Council of Europe, the European Court of Human Rights, the European Convention, of how important the Convention and the Court are in history for journalists. You know that there are 3,700 rulings in violation of member states of the Council of Europe over 40 years for freedom from Article 10, freedom of expression alone. 370 of those apply to Turkey. But what the court has achieved is it has achieved these landmark rulings which establish the obligations of states. And the obligations of states include putting in place protective measures. It may be police, it may be something else when they know that a journalist or writer is under attack, and also the obligation to do a proper investigation, because 9 out of 10 killings of journalists go unpunished, and many other things in libel law and in the right of journalists in protests and so on. All of those things have been established. Now I better move on quickly, but that was my revelation. And the system is failing because, as you implied in Cyprus and in Turkey, in Malta and elsewhere, the national governments are not doing what they have to do, which is to uphold the convention in their own national law. So we need the international dimension. And here we come to the work of the platform. For the first time, through the Council of Europe, we've got the 15 big freedom of expression organizations and journalist organizations all working together to find out the facts, to expose them, and then to have access to talk to the ministers, through the 47 ministers, sometimes directly, to try and influence their policy. And if you look at the conference of the media ministers in Cyprus last year, actually the Council of Europe has adopted nearly all of the main objectives of the media side, of the freedom of expression people, as its top policies. Of course, that's not always successful, but we're moving in the right direction, and there are improvements. The number of journalists in jail has actually come down. The rules on pre-trial detention are more strict, and so on. And you know, through the platform, we've been able to help our colleagues in Bulgaria, in Poland, in Italy, for example. In Italy, where they still have criminal defamation, including prison sentences for defamation for journalists, extra sentences, extra penalties. We're challenging that, and also vilifying and publicly attacking journalists by politicians. Now, so on the positive, and also the European Union, of course, has moved. At the beginning, they said we have very little competence, little power, which is true, but the little will as well. And of course, the member states didn't really want interference from outside. That has changed. Now there's this recommendation on the safety of journalists, which copies one from the Council of Europe 5 years ago, which I was involved with, the recommendation on the safety of journalists and the issue of impunity. And also a Media Freedom Act is coming down the line, dealing with some of these main issues. But in addition, we have competition now as the media. We have these new players. What you know, Bellingcat, this private organization, which exposed the work of Putin's agents, trying to kill Navalny, trying to plant the Novichok in Salisbury against former agents, etc., etc. You have StopFake in Ukraine and so on. These are signs of hope and life. And also in Britain, we have an excellent organization called Open Democracy, which is really pursuing our government. Press Gazette is doing an excellent job in that way as well. So there is a lot that we can do. That there are positives. We need solidarity. We need to be able to mobilize these international organizations. The OSCE, it doesn't have a treaty power, it doesn't have enforcement power, but it represents the idea of a democratic Europe, across the whole continent, from the Helsinki agreement of 1975 and then the early 90s with the end of communism. And so they're still doing good work, but they're in danger of being enfeebled because of political capture of the media, because of the collapse of the rule of law, which should defend journalists and defend Article 10. And today I just sent out to our AEJ friends, in terms of solidarity, a message about our former colleague, Alexandro from Belarus. He came to, I remember he came to several of our congresses, probably in Greece, certainly the one in Ordu in Turkey, and he's now in jail. He faces a 15-year sentence for high treason, just for helping other journalists and for working for the Belarus Association of Journalists. He's an impressive guy, so we must support all those people as we can. But the main thing that journalists can do is to know the facts, speak out to their own governments, and stand up for the principles of journalists at all times when they're at risk and in trouble. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you, William, for your input, especially in relation with contemporary challenges. And I would like to take a firm note of what you said, that there is room for improvement in recent times, especially due to the heavy engagement of the platforms have been created from journalists themselves in order to influence the policy centers, the Council of Europe, the European Union. You said little power and little will, although they have declared that they will act in favor of journalism and design the Media Freedom Act. We want to learn more about that. We do know that a number of our colleagues are online, and I will give them the chance to speak as well. Now I would like to ask Esra Aygin to reflect on that, on the subject. Esra?
Hello, hi. First of all, thank you all for your introductions and the insight, and especially Soula for reflecting the situation in our country. I mean, things are not different in Cyprus than what you're describing. I must say, in the last 10, 15 years, the situation for the media has really deteriorated. And we, even though we do face similar problems, both in the north and the southern part of the island, we also have very distinct, separate problems also. And first of all, Soula talked about the difficulty of functioning in a system where you are expected to follow the official line. So in Cyprus, you are expected to follow the official line, and not only that, you're expected to support it, and support your own side. So you're expected to choose sides. If you're a Turkish Cypriot and you try to understand the Greek Cypriot point of view, you're going to be a traitor. You're going to be paid by the Republic of Cyprus. You're going to be the enemy. And it's the same for my Greek Cypriot colleagues. I know because we talk and we share our experiences, and if they try to understand the Turkish Cypriot point of view and try to reflect on it, then they will become traitors in the eyes of their own administration. And this leads to a lot of problems. Maybe we are, thank God, not a country where journalists are being killed, but we are always being targeted by officials. We are losing our jobs, first of all, because our editors or the owners of the newspapers are put under pressure for employing a journalist who is a traitor, who is, you know, not following the official line and questioning the official line. And we are constantly becoming targets and receiving, especially with the rise of technology and the online, the social media, constantly being targeted on social media, receiving death threats, rape threats, and this is even more if you're a woman journalist, I must say, as it is in the rest of the world. If I look at the North specifically, of course, the North is a territory and an area that is under the control of Turkey. Even if it is not officially called that way, it is in practice controlled by Turkey. And as there was an increase in authoritarianism in Turkey, almost Turkey becoming a dictatorship, we all have also felt the consequences of this. We in the media are seeing a lot of our colleagues having to engage in self-censorship, not touching certain issues, not discussing certain issues. If they are, they will be, you know, again, targeted. They will be attacked. They will receive threats. We live in a part of the world that is considered, or legally that is European Union territory, but we are in a country where, you know, the Turkish embassy can just file complaints about certain journalists and newspapers, and they will be, as we see in the Africa incident, they will be, they will stand trial. We see in a part of territory where Recep Tayyip Erdogan, the president of Turkey, will come out and call on his fellow brothers in Cyprus to give the necessary response to certain newspapers or journalists. And then we see attacks, physical attacks, raiding, throwing stones, throwing sticks at that newspaper. We live in a part of the territory where, you know, you cannot even criticize the president for a certain policy. He will attack you on Twitter, online, and then this will lead to death threats, you know, for days, that last for days. So actually what we are going through in the North is not very different from what our colleagues in Turkey went through. It just came to us in a delayed way, later than, you know, what they had gone through this a lot earlier. But now we are going through the same things. And for the first time, we are seeing that, for example, Turkish Cypriot journalists are being, cases are being brought against them in Turkey. So they can't travel to Turkey. And we don't know when the Turkish Cypriot administration, which right now is following whatever Turkey is saying, can turn them in. We can't trust that they will not be turned in. So we are, yes, we have our challenges, common challenges with our Greek Cypriot colleagues, some distinct challenges for living under the control of another state, an authoritarian state. And yes, we have to, and I think this moment, international solidarity is very important. We need the solidarity of our international colleagues, international journalists, international organizations. We need them to support us, because honestly, on both sides of the island, the number of journalists who are truly practicing journalism in an independent way is very, very little right now. And if we don't help them, if we don't hold their hands, this number is going to become even less, and we are going to lose all our independent voice, independent journalism. So yeah, this is all I can say for now, and I would be happy to contribute more in the later discussions.
Thank you, Esra, for your contribution. Very, very valuable and very authentic of what is happening in the field. Thank you very much. Andreas Paraschos, if you want to join us and say a few words of what's happening in the south among the Greek Cypriot community. Andreas, just unmute your microphone, please.
Yes, okay. Good evening to all of you. It's nice to see you. Especially Doros Partasidis. It's been a long time since I saw you. Hi, Doros, in London. Well, you know, in my family, they taught me to be honest. So I thought that this would be a weapon in journalism. Instead of that, it became a very dangerous instrument that it can kill you if you are not careful. So I quitted my job in January 2021 because of an article I wrote, and because I was the director of Kathimerini in Cyprus for 13 years. And before that, I was the editor-in-chief in Politis for 10 years. So I quit it because my bosses, two brothers who own the Kathimerini, half of Kathimerini in Cyprus, they wrote an email to the president saying how sorry they were because of those things I wrote that day. But this is an old story now in Cyprus. I heard someone speaking about the consortium of journalism who are doing an excellent job in revealing what is going on and the corruption in which leaders of countries are involved. That was what I was writing in my article then about Mr. Anastasiadis, about his corruption and about the money he was taking to Seychelles, and about what he said to a dinner with Tsipras when Tsipras was the prime minister, that he's made 300 million the last 5 years when he was a president, and that his target is to make 1 billion at the end of his reign. It means at the end of the second term. And this, I heard it and I wrote about it from a leader of a party, the left-wing party, one of the biggest, Akel, who came from a meeting he had with Tsipras and said, guys, that's what Anastasiadis said to Tsipras during that dinner. This was confirmed to me by the leader of the Democratic Party, Nicholas Papadopoulos, who heard it from Andros Kyprianou, and he checked it with some sources he had in Greece, and they told him that was it. This was confirmed to me from the president of the ruling party, Αβέροφ Νεοφύτου. So this was the story, actually. When the Panama Papers came out, and the name was Anastasiadis who was involved.
Panama or Pandora Papers?
Excuse me?
Panama or Pandora Papers?
Ah, yeah, that was, the last thing was Pandora Papers, yes. There were so many papers I forgot. And I had a phone call from the BBC. So it was Mr. Richard Bilton, who was conducting the panorama. I think he wanted me to have, to interview me. So I said, gladly. You either send me the bill and the ticket and I come to London, or you come to London, to Cyprus. So they came to Cyprus and they had 2 interviews from Makarios Drysotis and from me. And that was last September, most probably, yeah. So it was, the interview was more than, it was something like 40 minutes. So I remember the cameraman that was thrilled when we finished, and he said, we caught the bastard. And Richard Bilton was laughing and said, you are very much in a hurry. Don't be thrilled, don't be so enthusiastic, because you have to show all these things to the lawyers. They called me after 2 months, and they said that the lawyer said that, no, guys. And then he himself called me and he said, Anastasiadis has this kind of high flyer lawyers in London, which said that we'll put you to prison. I said, but you are the BBC. He says, they don't care. So they did not wire anything about this. They did not say anything. And Richard Bilton, he's a very kind man. He said, I'm sorry, I cannot do anything. I will keep this thing. But so you see that not only Anastasiadis, there were something like 9 presidents in that thing, or prime ministers. So nobody was taken to court. Nobody stopped being a president. Nobody was called. What can we say? Nobody said sorry. I mean, everybody know they are corrupted. They themselves know that the world knows that they are corrupted, but they don't care. It's as simple as that. So we might have consortiums of journalists working and gathering information and revealing news, hard news, but nowadays, these guys, they don't care. What can I tell you? It is so frustrating, the climate, and so dangerous, because I know more things about Anastasiadis now. He was not only—
But Andreas, you feel very weak, taking into account how much protected they are because they are in power. This is the case, isn't it?
They are not only, I mean, if I was the European Union and I had a president who was so corrupted, I would—
Member of the European Council, member
yes,
of the
of course.
Yes.
I don't know if they can impeach them in the council. I think they can't, but I would say something about it. I would say to him, Mr. Anastasiadis, until you prove you are not guilty, you cannot join the cabinet. You cannot be a member of this body. I don't know. Well,
Thank you, Andreas. Thank you very much. I think it's very valuable what you heard, because it's a very clear proof that journalists are working in a very, very difficult context, and sometimes they are faced with the most provocative stance from this kind of political leaderships, exercising their power in a way that they feel they have unlimited power. They feel
these
power.
leaders, they became
Yes.
a network. And
They
it
became
is
a network.
mafia network. Nobody
Yes.
can touch them because they are above the law. Okay?
Thank
They
you,
are
Thank you,
not-
Andreas. Thank you. I will try to give the chance to other journalists to contribute as well, because we have some friends joining us from Italy, from Hungary. Maybe they want to contribute as well, giving their input for their respective countries. I don't know if our colleague Patricia Larese wants to speak, if she wants to unmute and say a few words. Patricia?
Good evening. Good evening, and sorry if I arrived late, but I received the information late. No, I'm sorry. I am a freelance, but I don't have a lot of things to say. Only one thing. A few years ago, I wrote an article about the Mapuches people in Patagonia against Benetton, but it was difficult, very difficult to publish, because the Benetton family is very, very has a very big power in Italy, and now I am doing other things, and so I'm glad to hear your story, and I prefer to listen to you.
Thank you very much, Patricia, for your participation. Doros Partasidis, my dearest friend, we used to be working together in CYBC. We are very glad he's joining us from United Kingdom. He's a member of the United Kingdom section, isn't it, William? Doros.
I couldn't miss it because of William, that is my chairman, and I appreciate his taking part. He's a very important personality for the freedom of media. I must say I don't agree with anything I hear, but what is my question is, knowing that in Turkey they put a lot of journalists in prison, diplomats, politicians, army people, our association is anything to do so we can hurt the Turkish government? That's my question. We hear every day about Turkish attitude towards freedom of the media, but I cannot see any organization taking action against the president of Turkey. And that's what is my question.
We will give the chance to William to reflect on that, and maybe Hasan Kafechioglu wants to say more in a while. Lena Kiropoulos from the Greek section wants to say something. Lena, do you hear us? Thank you.
Hello. Kalispera, everybody. I'm very glad that I'm here with you tonight. What I would like to say, I just hear very carefully everything that all the key speakers have said. But I think that really missing is that we have also the power. Okay, we're journalists. Everybody has its own field. But if we can combine in somehow the knowledge, the experience, and to exchange it, we can build a very strong network. We can make media conferences and to learn from each other. We need to cultivate not only our knowledge like, let's say, journalists, but also like human beings. Because we're not only journalists, we're also, let's say, people that they have impact also in other fields of life. For example, how many journalists can be, let's say, artists. So we have also to put in this game artists again and art, because we're living, especially during pandemic, in a very difficult period of our human life. And let's say the psychic resilience is not so strong like before. So we have to inspire from each other so that we can bring a new motivation to society again, like journalists. And I think it's very nice also from the colleagues from Italy, from Balkan, from United Kingdom, to hear the new tendencies, to hear how we can combine our forces so that we can make the difference, to make development, to make a process on that, not only to have the role of a journalist, but to be someone that can be inside the fight and make the best of it. Thank you very much. That's all I want to say.
Lena. Thank you, Lena. Hassan, do you want to reflect on issues related to media freedom among the Turkish Cypriot community as well as in Turkey? Unmute your microphone, Hassan. Hoca, unmute your microphone.
Yes, I do it.
Thank you.
Thank you, especially my regards to Williams and our president, Saiah, was here with that. I'm very glad to see them here with us, and their contributions are very valuable for me. When we look to the northern part of Cyprus, we can easily see that the critical journalism and the freedom of the press are under a growing pressure. I have to say this. Human rights, freedom of expression, freedom of speech, and pluralism of the media were keys of the functioning democracies. But the question is, are we enjoying these freedoms like in the modern democracies? I cannot say yes to this, because the territory that I am living on, despite there are no journalists in the prisons, there are many cases that journalists who have been sued, we know them. I can list them, but there is no need to because of the time. But the territory and the administration here is not within the international law. And this absence gives authorities a great uncontrolled advantage to exercise their power in a very different ways. And in this, they have very modern and very technical ways to silence the freedom of press here, especially in northern part of Cyprus, because this one is the one of them. But secondly, the regime of Turkey, like all the other areas, local fields, I mean, has a great influence on the press. Turkish media is here. All the TV stations and the papers are here. And there is a big influence. You can feel it in the streets. So the huge erosion of the media freedom in Turkey also affects the situation in Cyprus here. Turkey is one of the most remarkable violators of the European Convention on Human Rights with regard to media freedom, as we have heard from our friends. And the worst thing here is that the different types of pressure on the press, many journalists start to censor themselves. So this is one of the points that we have to discuss in another discussions, that how in a silence community, the journalists started to make a self-censorship and stop writing or be silent. Because here we see always we see that the fear is very important. Fear after they see what happened in Turkey. They know that any coverage of Turkey and its policies towards Cyprus is very risky. This is the general approach. Regarding the limitation and restrictions on press freedom, we have many similarities with the Greek Cypriot press. But additionally, we have this type of, let me say in a brackets, national issues or approaches or taboos or the other things. You know that there are some friends from our journalism community that they are under the big threat. One of them is Şener Levent. We don't know if they can put Turkish Cypriot journalists on trial in Turkey, but recently we have learned that judicial action launched by the local police here against 3 journalists of the Daily Africa. So Levent and his friends face 6 criminal cases for some articles they had written concerning Erdogan. They are accused by insulting and defaming the Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan. And another new obstacle or a threat, a big threat, I can say. Last October, the head of the Turkish Cypriot Press Trade Union was briefly detained at Istanbul airport and then deported from Turkey. Nobody knows the reasons of this entry ban. And even me, or most probably Esra Aygün, because of what we have written in our columns and our activities or our sayings against Erdogan and Turkey, we don't know if they will allow us to enter into Turkey. So we stop ourselves. We don't know the situation and we cannot travel to Turkey now. Me, myself, I have to say that I have a big foe to go to Turkey because maybe they may, you know, I may face the similar things when the other 3 journalists face at the airports. 3 Turkish Cypriot journalists that they know them all. So there are many, many, many problems and threats. And after this pandemic, you know, situation, the things are going to be worse because this pandemic situation gave the governments and the authorities a big power. They, you know, here in our place, they act like an authoritarian regime, and they became, they have the whole control of the media now. I can say that 80% of the media is under their control, and they have very, very effective tools to control the media. Because we see it every day that corruption, money laundering, human trafficking are not having enough place in the press. Even last week, there was an accusation against the Turkish ambassador here that his name or he's personally involved in a very dirty, you know, case, but nobody wrote about it. And in my article, I mentioned it, and I had some troubles. This is the last recent knowledge for you. So again, thank you, William. Thank you, Saiah, that you joined us. This is the, I think, as Esra Aygün said, we need more and more and more international solidarity. This is what I have to say at the end. Thank you for this.
Thank you, Hasan Hadjikyriakou, for your input. Definitely, we have still 10 minutes to go on, and we have to focus on what to think for our next step, both internally in Cyprus as well as in the level of the AEJ. In these 10 minutes, I will kindly ask other journalists if they want to contribute. Definitely, I would give the chance to Esra and Saiah and William to have a final say before we close this meeting. And if there are others, journalists, I see some friends from other sections, if they want to contribute, just send me a signal and I will give them the take. Esra, please.
Yes, I agree with what Hasan Kahvecioğlu said regarding the northern part of Cyprus. To the question of what we can do, I mean, yes, international solidarity is very important, but I cannot right now think of other means, because we also have limitations like or problems like media ownership. We are in the northern part of Cyprus, also in the south, I think. Soula, please, or Kyriakos, correct me if I'm wrong, but we have a very big ownership problem. We are seeing more and more that with the financial crisis and the COVID, which made the economy, the financial situation even worse, the media ownership is also changing. We are seeing that big businessmen, mafia bosses, casino owners, Turkish businessmen are buying the newspapers off, or buying off the journalists, putting them on a payroll, and using newspapers and the media environment as a way of pursuing their business interests. Media ownership is a huge problem that we have to start talking about. And again, the financial crisis made journalists even more dependent on the job that they have. So they are very reluctant to put their job in risk, to take any professional risks. They say, okay, I will keep quiet, I will not touch these issues because I cannot lose my job right now. So the issue of the financial difficulty and the media ownership are, I think, the two very problematic things that we also need to look into and discuss more and pick our brains and I don't know, just brainstorm on what we can do about. And thank you. This was an amazing opportunity, and I hope a start to a long-lasting dialogue. And looking forward to having more discussions with all of you. Thank you.
Definitely, Esra, one of the key aims of this endeavor is to give the chance to all of us to join our colleagues from AEJ International and get their contacts and their direct chat in order to see where we stand, what kind of challenges we face, and definitely to give a follow-up in our congresses to come next October in Greece, the General Assembly. Definitely we need to find more ways to discuss. In issues related to media ownership, I have to tell everyone that we need to have a close eye of what is happening in the context of the European Union, especially in relation with the annual reports for rule of law. Issues of media freedom are as a spotlight in their reporting, and we need to find ways to exercise pressure on the European Commission to check their will and their power to do more in relation with the rule of law and media freedom in their respective countries. For Cyprus, media ownership is under scrutiny now. It is already marked in the last report for Cyprus, and we need to stay focused on that. I'm talking about the Greek Cypriot community I know better. We do know that the report does not cover the North because the acquis is not implemented in the North, and we need to find indirect ways to influence the European Commission report, especially on issues of direct intervention of Turkey, media owners, and the propaganda exercise there. For the South, very, very important is the key element of corruption and the interconnection between media owners and political power, because there are a lot of things to do in order to check whether we have the quality of democracy we need or we are going backwards. This is the case for South, for North, for Greek Cypriot community, for Turkish Cypriot community. And this is the case, as I understand. Saiah and William, please correct me. This is the case also for many, many countries in Europe. Saiah?
I think that the most important thing is to report all these things, not once a year, but every day. We have to communicate together, all the journalists, and with our reports to press the European Union, and to press the European Union to press the governments. Mm-hmm. You know, because if they don't press the governments, nothing changed. The situation in Turkey is very bad, and we know that is one of the countries with a huge number of journalists and academics in jail. So we have to find a solution. I don't know how we can do it, but we have to talk and report. And one of our main goals is to not only to go to the European organizations as an attendee, but as a participant in a very crucial way to create a law, something like a law, a protection to journalists. I think that one of the main issues of the association, as I told you in the beginning, is media freedom. And one of the main goal of the association is to make a safer or to plan a safer way for journalists to work. So I think William is doing an excellent job in this field, and we hear him when he has something to say. I want also to report the killing of a journalist, a Greek journalist in Egypt. I don't know if you know it, but they murdered a Greek journalist in Egypt. He was a correspondent for the our news press agency, and is in the news now. So
South Sudan, as our colleague Lena Kiropoulos is saying. Yes. Mm-hmm. So we need to report more. We need to have
yes, we need to report with these reports to press the European institutions, organizations, and the governments to create a safer place to work for journalists.
So, William, the final say is on yours. On your side, you have a long experience. You know how the mechanisms in Council of Europe work, how the European Commission is reflecting to that. What can we do more in order to be heard?
Well, on the plus side, on the positive side, two things. One is recently the Committee of Ministers, which is the political representatives of the member states, which takes decisions after the European Court has ruled against Turkey, for example, on the imprisonment of Osman Kavala. It's up to the ambassadors to decide how strictly they will try to enforce that, to execute the judgments. And recently they took a big step because they announced that Turkey will suffer infringement proceedings, which means eventually they could be heavily fined. In addition to that, they could be suspended. Their membership could be suspended of the Council of Europe. This would be a terrific blow to their reputation. And in that vote, it's all recorded on the Council of Europe website. I think only 2 other countries supported Turkey. That's quite significant because Azerbaijan, Turkey, Russia, and others have been trying to get their friends into a group to resist the reformist movement within the Council of Europe. There's also a little bit of good news about the, Vera Jourova for the Commission is doing an excellent job. Her heart is in it, but she's stretched because she really does not have those competencies. They can't tell member states what to do. All they can talk about, they can do exhortation, and they can do things to do with the market, market conditions. So, for example, regulating public service media, and indeed the media landscape. So on the ownership side, I hope that they will take action. I believe they are now preparing serious action against slaps, abusive lawsuits. To my mind, we need to mobilize the international legal community and the lawyers within each country, the human rights lawyers and the bar associations, to say our reputation is now being trashed because we are not protecting the law, particularly in freedom of expression and media. So that's one thing that can be done. You know, we have all these organizations like International Press Institute, constantly does press freedom missions and reports on Turkey, Human Rights Watch. They're all about, and then recently you probably saw that, I think it was 12 European Union ambassadors went to Erdogan and complained and tried to get him to change his policy. He threatened, to renege on his agreements with migrants and other things that would really embarrass. So of course they backed down. But still, we need to encourage, and the UK, by the way, was too cowardly to say anything because they were regarded as a strategic partner. So these political calculations, particularly over the deal with Turkey on migrants in return for money, not to send the migrants over and so on, I'm afraid is very, very hard. Can Dündar was extremely articulate on this, saying, the EU, when they watch journalists like him being persecuted, prosecuted and jailed in Turkey, they're not living up to the European ideals themselves, whereas the journalists are trying to do it. So I wonder whether you can mobilize the public opinion more within your countries and maybe build on the idea of a national action plan for the safety of journalists. This is now an idea which is supported by all the institutions, Council of Europe, EU, OSCE, they all want to do it. Using your human rights institutions, using your independent experts, academics and others who are willing to get a body of people together to make that demand, maybe with support from these institutions. There may be some way to make progress on that. For example, through parliamentarians in the UK, we now have a national action plan, which people will have some hopes it will improve. For example, the protection of journalists during protests, because there've been a lot of violent protests recently also in the UK. But these things all require political will, and as we have agreed, it's in short supply. But we still have what they used to call the CNN effect. If the media are strong enough and united enough to expose things, then the politicians really feel embarrassed and they may sometimes change. That's what happened with the Panama Papers, for example, in some cases, at least 15 out of 88 cases, I believe. So we have to build on what we've got. Today was a very learning experience for me. It was great to hear about the detail from you as practitioners in some of the difficult parts. These islands in the Mediterranean seem to be having special problems, but not only you. It's now almost universal, and it's spread, I'm afraid, to the countries, the older democracies as well. So let's build on the goodwill. We have a very good Secretary General now of the Council of Europe, Madame Buric. She's really strong, and she's encouraging the media freedom and the media organizations to speak out and try to press the governments. And there's now a group in Strasbourg, as well as in Paris with UNESCO and Geneva with the Human Rights Commission of the UN, of so-called the group of nations for safety of journalists. And we try to mobilize them to speak up on these issues, because you're right, we need the political voice urgently. Yes.
Thank you very much, William, for your speech, for your contribution, especially Saiah, President of AEJ International. Very, very warm regards to our friends from all around Europe, the sections of AEJ, Hungary, Italy, Greece. Many thanks for your participation, UK as well. Especially, I would like to thank my Turkish Cypriot colleagues and Greek Cypriot colleagues who are working together in the Cyprus section. As you know, we are working bi-communally, and this is a principle of our work. We want to feel and work as journalists for the whole country, even if we are still separated by this anachronistic line. Please, kindly asking our friends from AEJ, Saiah and William, maybe we can design a new webinar in the coming months with a key figure and the participation of other sections as well, of what is happening on the ground, what is happening with media freedom, if we can attract the participation of someone from the Council of Europe, or the European Commission, or even the Commissioner, Vera Jourova, on issues related to media freedom. We do know that it is a declared priority, the Media Freedom Act of the European Union, and it is among the key fundamental principles of democracy. If we can do something more, we are available and provide any assistance as Cyprus section. Many, many thanks to all of you. Have a nice evening. Have a nice evening. Many, many thanks.
Have a nice evening.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Sorry. Can we have a photo, because I would like to make an essay with your speeches, etc.
Okay, we have open photo.
Give me a second, because I'm through my mobile. If somebody, Saiah, can you maybe take a picture and send to me with everybody on the panel?
Vera, all the video will be on YouTube.
Okay.
You can take it from there if you want to have more. We will have it online because it was live streaming and we recorded. Many thanks to everyone. William, Saiah, all our friends from Europe, Turkish Cypriots and Greek Cypriots. Soula, Hassan,
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye, Andreas.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Congratulations to everybody. Really great. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Bye-bye.